In this lesson, we're going to discuss modules and how they affect the particle system's behavior. Alright, so in the last lesson we had learned how to create a particle system. We discussed a little bit about the anatomy of a particle system, including the particle emitter and the modules. And we left off with the modules, and we want to talk about how we can affect the behavior of our particle system. So as of right now, this particle system appears to be something like steam, and the reason for that is because of the material. It doesn't really have much of a behavior. What we have is an initial size. We have how many particles are being spawned at one time. They have an overall life, so you can see that they're fading over time, and then they have a little bit of color to them, which is from the material itself. Some are fading at the end, and they have a speed to them. So they have all these properties, and those properties are derived from the modules that you see here in the emitter. So to get started, we're going to start right up here at the top with our required module. This is the one that has to be with the material itself. It's going to hold things like it needs to be with the particle system itself. It's going to hold the material, and it's going to hold a little bit of general information about that. Then we'll go into spawn, and spawn is going to determine how many particles are emitted. You can change that based on the rate that you see here. So if you just continue to drill down into that, you can see that you have a constant value. Now you can change how this particle emits, or how this particle system emits particles based on the distribution type. So the distribution type, as of right now, it is set to distribution spawn rate. But you can go ahead and you can change it to one of these if you like. In this case, I'm just going to leave it the way it is because it gives me a nice constant value that I can change. So if I change this to 100, we're going to get more particles emitting, and you can see how many particles are emitting at one time. You could also adjust the rate scale, and this is basically just a multiplier. So if we wanted to set this to something like 3, you'll notice that we now have 300 particles, and now this definitely looks like some steam pouring out of a pipe or something like that. Let's go ahead and set this back to 1. Now you might be wondering, well, why don't I just take the constant here and just set that to 300 if I wanted 300? What's the difference in that? Well, you may have a situation where you'll want 300 particles emitting, but you'll have a multiplier that is used through a curve or something like that, and maybe you won't get a full 300 all the time. You want to create a little bit of variation, so that's just one of those values and one of those positives for using that. So now that we've moved on from that, let's go ahead and go on to lifetime. Obviously, this is going to affect the life of each particle. How long does it live? And you have your distribution type. Each particle is going to live for a single second. So the minimum value and a max value is set to 1. Now you can set up a range to where some particles will live for a second, some will live for about 5 seconds, and then in between at any random time. So to set up a range, you could simply do something like 1 and 5. So some will live longer, some will die at 1 second, so on and so forth. So it all depends on how you want that set up and what behavior you need for your particle system. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just set it to 1 for right now. Then we have initial size. Initial size obviously is going to deal with the initial size of each particle. So as of right now, they're set to 25. Now if I was creating something like dust, let me go ahead and bring that particle effect back in here. If I was creating something like dust, I probably wouldn't use particles that large. Might knock this down to maybe 10 all the way across on that, just for right now. So that way we can still see. We may even go smaller than that if needed. So it's set to a constant value of 10, so each particle is going to be the exact same size. If you wanted to, you could set your minimum value to, let's say, 5 on those, and you'll have some that are smaller, you'll have some that are larger, totally up to you. Alright, now let's go on to initial velocity. This is going to determine how fast each particle is going to be emitted whenever the particle system starts. So what you're getting here is a speed or a velocity of, looks like 100 in the z direction. Now you're getting a little bit of spread, and that's coming from the x and y value on that. So that's why we get a little bit of this cone shape. If we didn't want any spread on that, let's say we wanted just a stream of those particles, we'd set the x and y to 0, and you'll notice that those are coming out like that. Now, the reason that we're still getting a little bit of spread is because we have a min value, which is setting to a negative value there. So here's a constant stream. Now, we want these to spread out kind of like dust would. So let's do something like this. Let's say 100, 100, and let's do negative 100 and negative 100. And we'll do that same thing on the z there. And so now you get particles that are shooting out in all directions here. Now that's a little chaotic here because the speed is just way too fast for that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll set this to 1 all the way across the top, and then we'll do negative 1 across the bottom. Now you might see this and you might go, okay, wow, that is really slow. It doesn't even really look like the particles are emitting. They are emitting. You can see a little bit of jump here and there, but they are emitting. It's just that the speed that they have doesn't allow them to go that far out. And so now we need to talk about how do we get them to emit in a different location instead of a single point like that. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. There's one other thing that I want to talk about because we have this color over life module that came with this default particle system. The color over life module is very important. It's one of the main ones that you'll have in a particle system because it controls the fade of your particle systems. So I know it says color over life, and color over life is perfectly fine. It's going to give us this white value based on the distribution that I have. So if I take a look at my points here, I have 2 points, 0 and 1, and they each have their own value. So this starts at a value of 0 at time, and then this one is going to 1 second. So it's changing the color between those two values. So it's going from 0 to 1, and then it's changing the values right here. So look at your out value. Now obviously it's 1 to 1 on that, so we're just going to get these white particles all the time, and that's perfectly fine. What's really cool about this is that we have this alpha over life. And this is really neat because now we have 2 points, and we have a value of 0. The out value is at 1, okay? Whereas the in value is at 1 second, but the out value is at 0. So what is the out value? That's basically the color that we see there. Now, sometimes whenever looking at these numbers, it's kind of hard to see exactly what that's doing. I'm a little bit more of a visual person, and so I like to see things in curves. And we can do that by clicking on the module and clicking on this curve here. Now this should make a little bit more sense. So this is point 1 right here. Okay, let's go ahead and hold down the left mouse button and we can drag that around. This is point 1. Its value, okay, or its time is at 0. Okay, so this is the in value, but its out value is set to 1, which you can see here. So we have a white color on that. But then we have point 2, or actually point 1, not point 2. And so point 1, which is down here, has a time of 1 second, which is its in value. And then the out value, which is its color, is set to 0, which is a black color. And so what we're getting in our alpha is we're getting a particle that is fully opaque, so we can see it. But then as time goes on for this, at 1 second, it begins to fade out. Now we know that we've already set up the lifetime of this to 1 second. Okay, so if we go over here, we have a min and max value of 1 second. If we were to adjust that, we would need to make sure that we adjust our color over life. Okay, so just be aware of that. All right, so now that we have this set, actually no, I just told you that we would have to set it to color over life. If you change the lifetime, it's going to use this as a multiplier. So at the very beginning, whenever it spawns, it's going to be white. And this is going to multiply it over its lifetime. So let's say that we change this to 4. And let's do 4 and 4. Each particle is going to start out white, and then it will fade until it gets to the end of its life to black. Okay, which you can kind of see here. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about how we can modify this even more. We've talked about all of these initial modules, and I hope you kind of get an idea of how they work. You select each module, adjust the details, its properties, and then reiterate. Add what you need to this. So right now what we need is we need a different location for our particles to emit in. And so we're going to go ahead and jump in how we can change that in our next lesson.